Welcome back, everybody. It's the Fantasy Pros Dynasty Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Scott Bogman. Follow me on the Twitter at Bogman Sports. I'm joined, as always, by Pat Fitzmaurice at FitzFF on the Twitter machine. Fitzy, how's it going? We took a week off. You had to go to Vegas and party. You know, we understand. I hope you had a great time on your vacation, man, and happy to be back and talking some football and Senior Bowl here.
Thanks, buddy. Yeah, it was a good couple of days. It was a break-even trip, which always feels like a win. Although, you know, like I feel kind of guilty that I did better like in video poker than college basketball betting, where I just got my tail handed to me, especially Saturday. Taking a bunch of like road favorites is never a good idea, and went down the tubes that way.
Yeah, you know, I think you can get away with that in the pros a little more than you can in college, but I'm just glad you had a good time and a break-even trip to Vegas. That is a big win. So happy to have you back. Happy to be back and to join us to talk about the Senior Bowl. A guy that was there, Thor Nystrom at ThorKU on the Twitter machine. Thor, how is Mobile, man? And you're back. You got your phone back. That was a whole fiasco you told me about. Fresh off of dealing with customer service as well. Just a lot of action going on in Thor's world. So how are you, man? Good to talk to you again.
Yeah, I'm doing well. It's been a whirlwind, always is, down in Mobile. Wasn't a help to myself leaving the phone in the lift to the airline, or to the airport. But we did get it back, and I'm excited to be with you guys talking about what happened at the Senior Bowl. A lot happened down there. We saw lots of things on the practice field, so excited to talk to you about all the risers and the fallers that we saw down in Mobile.
Yeah, we're gonna talk a little bit about the Senior Bowl and a little bit about your rankings as well, if you'll indulge us. So I'm gonna hand it to Pat to kick off to talk some QBs here.
Yeah, Thor, I know it wasn't a banner Senior Bowl for quarterbacks, but I'm just curious, like taking a look at how you see things shaping up. Do you expect the draft order to be Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Will Levis, and Anthony Richardson as far as the quarterbacks, or do you think there's room for a shakeup there?
I think that's still up in the air. Yeah, and a part of it's going to depend, of course, on if the Bears trade down and who they trade down with. But yeah, I think that's still up in the air because I don't think that there's a consensus at all with the teams as far as who the top quarterback on their board is. Like, you know, I think if you pulled the 32 teams, you're going to see different top four quarterbacks on their boards. You know, it would be a shakeup. So it's just going to depend on who's at the top of the board, and then, you know, who ends up picking there.
How about you, man? I'm like curious because obviously like Will Levis and Anthony Richardson are like super toolsy. You know, Levis just has the cannon arm. Richardson, you know, like sort of the Dante Culpepper starter kit. Like, how do you feel about those guys versus Young and Stroud?
For me, it's Bryce Young with a bullet. The first one. The debate for me starts after that, but for me, it's Bryce Young's the top player in the class, not just the position, but and you know, again, the debate starts after that. I would go Stroud too. I'm more confident in that position now, certainly, than I would have been during the season. Like up until the Georgia game, because before then, Stroud was struggling throughout the regular season in comparison to what he'd done the season before when he was quite impressive. But the Georgia game, we saw CJ Stroud at the peak of his powers, and we saw him address question marks on his evaluation or things that we hadn't seen before, you know, specifically with him stealing yards outside of the pocket, him throwing on the run, making decisions on the run.
I mean, getting away from Carter on that first touchdown throw was outstanding. That was
super impressive.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, like just things we hadn't seen from him before, you know, and then, you know, the strengths of his game as well, you know, so all that different stuff, he answered questions about his evaluation for me. So I feel a little bit more confident about slotting him too. The 3 and 4, I got a little bit of a different take, I think, on that than some other folks. I you know, like, because, you know, you know, with Levis and Richardson, both those guys have questions. If I'm gonna shoot the moon on one of those, I'm going with Richardson. I'm gonna shoot all the way. You know, both those guys are high variance prospects. Richardson has the better tools. So right now, I would have him at number 3, and I would put Levis at number 4. Then you have obviously a drop off until you get to the number 5 guy, you know, and dropping down to the tier. But that's how I'd have it right now.
I got a follow up here on Bryce Young. Bryce Young, number one with the bullet. I don't think that anyone would argue with that in terms of skill. I guess my question would be, and it's not, I want your personal opinion on what you think NFL evaluators are doing here with the size concerns, because Bryce Young is the best quarterback in this draft. It's not a question, but he's slight of frame. He's a little bit shorter as well, which we have seen, guys like Drew Brees have Hall of Fame careers, successful, unbelievably successful. But Tua got hurt this year. He can't protect himself. He's going through the multiple concussions. Seems like he may have to cut his career short. Do you think, is that a concern for you? And do you think NFL evaluators are over-evaluating that coming off the heels of what just happened to Tua in 2022?
As far as the size thing, I think it's case specific, as far as the prospect goes. And with Young, it's not as big of a concern because of his game. And also because I've seen him in there against the SEC defenses. He's been able to stay on the field. And I've also seen him with injuries to comparable prospects that held him out longer. Like, for instance, this past year, he suffers an AC joint sprain of his throwing shoulder, and it kept him out for 1 week. There was a bunch of different quarterbacks this year that had the AC joint sprain of their shoulders, where it kept him out for multiple weeks. Bryce Young is a super twitchy type athlete. Not only does it allow him to sort of sustain the blows and have him be sort of like glancing shots, it also seems like he sort of like heals like Wolverine, from the X-Men a little bit. And so, maybe I'm naive a little bit, but I'm not as concerned by that aspect of it as maybe some other guys. And then, of course, I just think I believe that he is a prodigy. And just sort of like he's a throwing prodigy. You look at like his performance under pressure. These other top guys, their performance craters under pressure a little bit to some degree or another. Like, some of the guys maybe not as much, but like a guy like Will Levis, like this past season, his play really cratered under the pressure. Bryce Young, this past like the year before, Bryce Young was playing, with a fabulous supporting cast. But I think it would surprise people out there to know, like, his offensive line was way down this past season. His receiving core in particular, people think about like the Alabama receiving cores from the past, all the first round picks they had. Alabama's receiving core last season was not very good.
I mean, if they could catch the ball, they would have smoked Texas. I was watching the Texas game, and I was just like, this is unbelievable how he makes escaping look so easy to him too. That's why I'm with you, Thor. I don't have those concerns as people did, and now we've seen it come to fruition with Tua. I think his escape, he's maybe not a scrambler, but he can extend the play a little bit, and he can not take as many hits. I mean, that was a big Lamar thing coming into the league was, well, he's going to burn out after a couple of years because he runs and he takes hits, but he took less hits than other quarterbacks because he stepped out of bounds so much, and guys just wouldn't physically touch him. So he was hit on way fewer, plays than other guys. I think the same thing can happen for Bryce Young within the pocket. He's not a guy that's obviously is going to scramble like Lamar. It's that same ability in a different situation is all. One more follow-up on this question about the top four here. Can any of these guys, does Richardson need to throw to move up boards? Will Levis has done nothing in this process outside of interviews and stuff. Does he need to do anything? We know Young and Stroud, we know what they are. I don't expect them to do much at the combine, but do Levis and Richardson need to do that? Or if you were them or their agent, would you say, look, you've already getting mocked in the top 15 on every single thing. Don't do anything. Go there and interview, and that's it.
Yeah, I think it depends, if you're their representative, because that's what it's going to come down to, the advice they get. I think it's going to depend on the momentum they get leading up to that. But like if, like where they're getting mocked and what they're hearing from the NFL teams or whatever, I would advocate for both of them, I did for Lamar. I did for Malik Willis last year. I advocate for them to go out there and perform because their tools are so much better than some of these other guys. I think Malik made a mistake by not going out there and athletically testing. last year because he would have tested as the most athletic quarterback who would ever tested. Obviously, Lamar, he did not test as well. He ended up slipping into the very back end of the first round anyway. But some of those guys, they're concerned. This isn't a concern, obviously, for Levis, but also it's not a concern for Richardson either. But they're like in the back of their head, they're concerned, like, if I test too well, is the NFL going to consider me like a position convert or whatever? But like for Richardson, I would go in there, I would show them my howitzer, and I would also athletically test. But yeah, I mean, if his representatives feel like, you know, in the case of Richardson, my draft floor is Washington, like there's no way I'm falling beneath that. Why would you go in and throw or run? Because if you don't, you know, run or throw well, and then your accuracy percentage and stuff like that, and people start nitpicking your profile, then, you know, like maybe it's too much of an excessive risk to do so. But for me, I'm going to go in there and compete.
Yeah, give it your all. I'm with you on that. I think that's the smart play by most of those guys. I got another question here, but before I get there, I got to make sure you are getting ahead of the game with our 2023 NFL Draft Guide at fantasypros.com/draft guide. We've got player profiles, mock drafts, big boards, and coverage of the Senior Bowl, NFL Combine, and more. We've got you covered on all things related to the NFL Draft for free. Premium subscribers also get access to our NFL Draft position rankings. So go premium if you haven't already, and get your 2023 NFL Draft Guide now at fantasypros.com/draft guide. All right, let's talk about Mobile. You were down there in Mobile. You were in the mix. You saw the quarterback play. I mean, thank God you weren't at the Shrine game because there was no quarterback play there. A kicker won player of the game. But Jake Haener, the quarterback from Fresno State, won player of the game at the Senior Bowl. We saw him complete a bunch of passes. He looked pretty good. Size concerns with him, but he has accuracy. Maybe not the biggest of arms, but I think it's good enough. I think he's obviously moved up draft boards because after you get to the top 4 and then probably Hendon Hooker, I know there's other outlets that have Jaren Hall in that mix too. I don't really, but Hendon Hooker's right after that group. And then it's kind of the Wild West. But I think Jake Haener moved himself up. Is that what you saw, Thor? And who else among the QBs moved their stock up or down this week in Mobile?
Yeah, Haener was definitely the winner from the Senior Bowl, and the rest of the quarterbacks out there on the field did not look very good, which is part of the reason why he's a winner. And by the way, it's part of, like Hendon Hooker was a winner too. He wasn't able to get out on the field because he was injured, but he was in Mobile, of course. But he was a winner just by comparison.
No trouble like Stetson Bennett because he actually showed up and did stuff.
Well, and Stetson Bennett was a loser for deciding to turn down the invitation. And out knocking on doors in Dallas, whatever the heck he was doing. He should have shown up just because in comparison to some of those other guys out of the field, I think he would have, impressed by comparison. But, as far as Haener, yes, he's small. He does not have a howitzer for an arm, and he's just sort of an average athlete, but he was everything that you wanted him to be. He showed up and he was as advertised. He makes very quick decisions. He's accurate. He gets the ball out on time and on receivers' hands. Like, he's going to run a system well for you because he consistently makes the correct decisions. And again, it's like it's all clockwork. It's just like click, 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 click. These other quarterbacks that you saw, they're like another thing with Haener with the footwork. Like the other quarterbacks, you'd see wonky bases. You saw bouts of inaccuracy. You saw wonky decision making. But with Jake Haener, you didn't see any of that stuff. Was Jake Haener wowing you with his physical prowess? No, not at all. But you saw, like, he's going to run your system well. So, like, when you're, you're thinking about, like, who's this class's Brock Purdy? For me, that, like, Jake Haener is the leader in the clubhouse for that kind of a thing. The loser of that position group in Mobile, you brought his name up. It's Jaren Hall. Jaren Hall had the unfortunate thing of he was on the same team in that event as Jake Haener. So they were practicing right across from each other, like when they were doing the team drills on opposite sides of the field.
Just embarrassing him.
He pretty much was, yeah. I mean, Jaren Hall was inaccurate all week. He was making poor decisions all week. He was having balls batted at the line. He was throwing interceptions in the team drills. His mechanics looked all off. He was missing low. He was missing high. His placement was off. He was just off all week long. And then he decided to pull out of the event early. It was funny. He was actually on my flight out of Mobile. And I was thinking he actually literally sat in the seat right behind me on the plane.
Oh, that's funny.
I was wondering if he was going to kick my seat. I was like, I hope this guy didn't read some of the stuff I was writing in Mobile. but yeah, he did not have the best week. And then so some of the Badgent, the kid from Shepherd, the D2 mystery box kid, he actually has an NFL arm. It was kind of interesting. He's got some juice in his arm, but he's super inaccurate. But he's like sort of the ball of clay guy. He's definitely going to get drafted because a team's going to bring him in and just sort of work with him for a couple years and see if he can sort of work with the technique is more or less what that kid needs. Because like there are times where it's like, wow, like, I mean, he'll rip it down the field 25 yards and hit a guy right on the hands, as he's moving down the field, whatever. But like, there's other times where he'll miss like an open receiver, like, 7 yards downfield. It's like, what the hell, or just throw it right into the linebacker's chest plate or whatever. But he has some tools. And obviously he just shredded the D2 level. I believe he holds the college football record for most touchdown passes, regardless of level. And then Clayton Tune, he just sort of, he came in with this sort of conservative ethos that he also displayed on film, where like he just doesn't really test tight windows. He's one of those guys who like, Pat, I know you were just in Vegas. He's the guy at the blackjack table who always stands on 16. It's sort of frustrating. It's like, Clayton, come on, rip it downfield. But he's chuck it down anytime he doesn't have the wide open receiver. So I wanted to see a little bit more from Tune, but it certainly wasn't a disaster for him like it was from Jaron Hall.
And look, it's not the best QB class here, but ask the Niners, and you saw from the Niners, backup quarterbacks matter, and teams need them, especially with the extra game and the offensive line play getting worse around the league than it has been in a while. Teams need backup quarterbacks, so I'm with you. Let's transition to running backs here, and Thor, I just want to know what pick makes the most sense for Bijan, because you see all these mocks and the general thought process of running backs here is, look, running backs need to go late in the first, if in the first at all. That's kind of the thought process at this point with running backs. And I think it's like the last 7 or 8 Super Bowl champions haven't been paying their running back more than $1 million. Like, it's just, it makes sense to save money at that spot, spend it elsewhere. And you don't do that taking one in the first round, but Bijan is that type of generational talent, whatever word you want to use it, generational, whatever. He's a great talent. He's best running back coming into the draft since Saquon Barkley. So I have some spots for him, and I want to know what makes sense the most in the first round for you. 9 for Carolina. They have too many needs, correct? Can't do it there.
For sure. Yeah, for sure.
Houston at 112.
Yeah,
Still
I wouldn't
too
do
early, too many needs.
Same. Yeah, same.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now we get into maybes, I think. New England. I've seen this mocked a couple times. Ramondre Stevenson obviously just had a great year. They lose Damian Harris, though, and they need explosiveness. Bijan is explosive. Does this make any sense, or is this why would you take Bijan when you have Ramondre?
The latter. I still wouldn't do it there.
Okay.
In that situation.
118 Detroit. Jamal Williams is an unrestricted free agent. Should they decide not to bring him back, obviously they still have DeAndre Swift, but Swift is not a guy that can get 20 carries. But if you do take Bijan, you're kind of pushing Swift out the door as well. I don't know if that makes sense either.
Getting warmer, but I still wouldn't do it there if I'm
Fox, can I interrupt you for a second?
Please.
So I think there's a top 10.
Did I skip someone?
I think so. The Eagles at 110, a team that possibly has the infrastructure in place already and could maybe afford a luxury pick that early. What do you think about that, Thor? Especially with Miles Sanders about to walk as a free agent, maybe, or maybe not walk, but he is going to be He's a UFA.
Yeah.
It seems like Roseman is too analytically inclined to make a decision like that, but he could surprise us. Like for me as I wouldn't go as far as, Mel Kiper is like the famous guy where it's like by rule, he wouldn't take one in the first round. I wouldn't go that far, but like for me, it would be more like top half of the first by rule. Like for me, like with a guy like Bijan, like for me, I would need it to be like after 16 probably.
Okay.
Yeah.
The only reason I didn't put the Eagles on there is because I'm pretty sure they're taking a corner there. I think they're going to be maybe up against the cap. Maybe they can't get Bradbury back. I think that's a perfect spot for a corner.
Placeholder. Yeah, that makes sense.
So that's the only reason I didn't put them on there. The Chargers at 1.21. Austin Eckler getting a little long in the tooth. They've been looking for that backup. This is an easy transition plan for when Eckler, retires or hits the wall.
But Eckler is still under contract, right?
Yes.
I don't think they're going to do that then.
Okay. That's fair. 122 to Baltimore. J.K. Dobbins made a little noise. Could get cut. This is a run-first team. I hate this idea. I despise it.
I love this idea. This is the pairing I want. I want Bijan with Lamar Jackson.
Well,
this
you're not
is
a
what the
Steelers
NFL
fan,
needs.
Thor, so
yeah.
This is what the NFL needs. This is the pairing I want to see.
I want to see that pairing, but I want to see it in Miami. The Giants, Saquon could walk. They have one franchise tag to use. They're going to use it on Daniel Jones. We know that unless they work it out with him. So Saquon, they might let him walk and then try to take Saquon if he falls. What do you think about that pick?
Yeah, I mean, if Saquon left, that would be, I mean, like my comp, and I'm not the only one, but my comp for Bijan is Saquon. So that would make a ton of sense if Saquon left and you just slot Bijan right in for him.
The other three here that I have, I think two have been mocked the most. Dallas at 26, Buffalo at 27, and then New Orleans at 29 because Kamara is going to be suspended. And as soon as they can cut Kamara, they're going to. It doesn't make any sense this year, but he's going to have a big suspension. They don't know what they're doing at quarterback right now. They're over the cap, so why not get a running back that you can give the ball to 25, 30 times a game and, probably going to have to roll with Jameis right now or do some weird finagling of the cap to try to get Derek Carr, I guess.
Yeah, these ones make a little bit more sense to me. These pairings down the board a little bit. And that's where I think he ends up going is like somewhere in that, 18 to 25, 26 range, right? And who knows? Maybe I end up being wrong and he goes, top 15 or top 15 or something. But I think at the end of the day, it's going to be somewhere towards the latter portion of it.
If that happens, it's a trade. Someone trading in. That's it. Yeah.
I mean, there's been so much talk about Bijan and Lord knows Bogman and I have spilled many words on him. And but like there's another Texas running back who's I think was turning some heads in Mobile, and I kind of blame Bogman for not talking this guy up more. Roschon Johnson. Tell us about him and what you saw to him that like wowed you in Mobile.
Well, the kid's a unit, when, at the weigh-ins and then the first time you see him, you're like, whoa. Yeah. I mean, that kid is built. He's a little bit taller than your traditional running back and is built out, is jacked. And we only got to see him for one day. Unfortunately, he broke his hand on Tuesday. Very impressively, he finished practice with a broken hand. And they had to explain to Roschon, like after practice on Tuesday, when they found out he had the broken hand, they had to tell him like, Roschon, you can't practice with a broken hand. Like your week is over. Like we can't let you keep doing it. Like he wanted to keep going. And then they ended up replacing him with Sir Roderick Thompson. But what we saw from him on Tuesday was pretty impressive. And it's what you see on film. He's very good in pass pro. And he's pretty good at between the tackles as well as a runner. As a receiver, he's just a dump off guy now. I wonder if some of the athleticism, he's not super duper shifty, but he is more athletic than you think. As Bogman will know, he has hurdled many guys during his collegiate career. Run them over as well. But it's funny because with the bigger backs, invariably defenders will start to try to dive bomb your knees, like they started to do with Gronk, but like with Roschon, you start going low with him, he'll be like, and then he'll start, hurdling you or whatever. But like with the receiving element of it, he's just a dump off guy so far, but that area of his game, they didn't leverage a ton, obviously, because they had Bijan. And that's what sort of makes him an interesting thought experiment, because on the one hand, it's like it was sort of an advantageous situation for him. You kept the wear on the tires low. And then when you came in, it was advantageous because the defenses were tired. But then on the other hand, he didn't get some of the work or some of the opportunities that some of these other backs did. The receiving element of it, he didn't get quite the opportunities to develop that some of these other guys did and stuff like that. But the pass pro, we know he's one of the better backs in this class, and it makes him playable on passing downs, even if at least initially for dynasty players, you can't project him to have the value in PPR leagues, perhaps that you would with some of these other backs, but he is playable on the passing downs. And at least the between the tackles hammer stuff you're going to get for sure. You brought up the name Ramondre Stevenson. He's going to remind you a bit of that as like the one cut guy. He can make the one guy in the hole miss with that sharp cut. And then either run you over or hurdle a guy, and stuff like that, and start motoring downfield. He's got a little bit more speed than you'd think. Straight line. Brian Robinson, another guy.
Thor, people forget about Roschon. He came into Texas as a quarterback, by the way.
That's right.
Came in, and that's why he's not the best route runner right now, and surprisingly is so good in pass pro, and why he's a little bit bigger too, 6'2" at running back. Usually RBs are not that tall. They moved him to running back. He embraced it. He never complained. He's a team leader. He's going to be a better pro than he was in college. And I am very excited about Roschon. So, yeah, maybe I haven't talked about him because I am obsessed with Bijan. But trust me, I know about my boy Roschon. I'm very excited for him. Before we get another question here, I got to tell you guys, as you know, the Super Bowl is here and the stakes are higher than ever. Make the most of your stake in the big game by joining us on our Betting Pros YouTube channel for our Super Bowl live stream this Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern. Joe Pisapia, Matt Freeman, and Daily Juice host Matt Peralt will run through all their favorite bets heading into the big game. Tune in, ask questions, and place your bets. Again, that's our Super Bowl live stream on our Betting Pros YouTube channel, youtube.com/bettingpros on Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern. We will see you all there. Going to be a fun Super Bowl.
Yeah, so Thor, we have to assume Bijan Robinson is going to be the first running back off the board. What are the odds? If not, we have to ride. Absolutely.
Yes.
What are the odds that Jahmyr Gibbs is number 2? And do you see a likely pecking order shaping up behind those two?
Very high on the first one. I would be surprised if Gibbs isn't. You're trying to think of scenarios where he wouldn't, barring like it's hard for me to even envision a scenario outside of putting something into the atmosphere that I don't want to. So I don't want to say that he's locked in, but I think it's a very high percentage that Jahmyr Gibbs is. I love him as a talent. I comp him to Delvin Cook, a running back that plays locally here and coming to you from Minneapolis. Behind him, it's more fluid right now. It's sort of choose your flavor. It's, sort of like we're talking about with quarterbacks after, whether you want to say 4 or 5, like if you're putting Hooker at 5, it becomes way more fluid after that, like after that tier or whatever. With running back, it becomes fluid pretty dang quick. The names behind there, right now, I would probably have Charbonnet 3, but you can certainly make the argument. Some people love Achane, right? But he's probably not the guy that you're going to give 250 touches to, right? Especially right away, right? More usage specific at 185 pounds. Another kid that I like, and some people like him even more than me, is Zach Evans from Mississippi. We haven't seen him the value as much on the passing downs, but as far as just as a pure rusher and sort of a locomotive, you really like what you see with him. Started his career obviously at TCU and then transferred out before their title run was at Mississippi this past year, and they were a dominant rushing team. What was interesting about him landing at Mississippi was Mississippi just ran into one of the biggest sleepers, like the breakout recruits in Quentin Johnston, who just came out of nowhere, was this 3-star running back, and then was one of the best freshmen in all of America. And Zach Evans obviously did not assume that he was signing with this team that was going to have one of the best freshmen in America, but Evans still acquitted himself very well at Mississippi. I also really like Kenny McIntosh, another kid that I saw at the Senior Bowl. McIntosh did miss a little bit of practice because he pulled a calf or something like that, the first day when it was really hot. I don't know, pulled something or whatever, but he's very, very fluid, and very skilled as a receiver. Those guys tend to start especially the guys who have to sort of share the usage sort of like James Cook last year, where they come into the process a little bit lower and under the radar, and then you always invariably see these guys rise as we get closer. McIntosh reminds me a little bit of Kenyon Drake. So like guys like that, we haven't mentioned Tank Bigsby. We haven't mentioned Tyjae Spears, another guy I saw at the Senior Bowl, one of the biggest risers there, may have been the biggest riser, especially on the offensive side of the ball. And then of course, Roschon, Sean Tucker, like so there's a lot of guys in that next tier where it's just very fluid and it's dependent on the person you talk to or the team's board that you look at, where it's going to be that third guy.
Oh, Combine's going to matter a lot.
Yeah, such a good class for running backs. Holy cow, man, just loaded.
Yeah. Into the fourth round.
It has top end talent, it has middle talent, and there's late talent too. So, and speaking of those guys that you saw in Mobile, Thor, Evan Hull, Tyjae Spears, and Eric Gray were the guys that seemed to have raised their stock the most. Is that what you saw? And was there anyone else impressive there?
Those three names I'd put at the top, and then the Roschon probably is what did the one day that we saw him, but like Tyjae I would put at the top, and the reason for that is he confirmed all the strengths of his evaluation while answering all the weaknesses. So he had a very sort of the high degree of difficulty, and he sort of not only checked all the boxes but also did the other stuff as well. The explosion was the special sauce of his evaluation. And he not only proved that, he proved that at a bigger size than we've ever seen him. He was listed at 195 at Tulane last year, was 190 listed before then. He showed up, measured in at 204 at the Senior Bowl. He told us at the Wednesday media breakfast in Mobile that he played the bowl game against USC at 197. He'd gotten up to by the end of the season. That bowl game was played on January 2nd. Man. And then he told us that he had packed on 7 pounds over the past 4 weeks during training for the Senior Bowl. And he looked very good. He looked a little bit thicker in his trunk and he, and the lower half as well. So it obviously been doing a lot of squats and stuff like that, been minding the diet and everything like that. And like I said, he kept the movement skills and the explosion and stuff like that. And then the other thing that he opened eyes with there, he was not throwing the ball a ton at Tulane and was not played as much on the third downs. They used a little bit more of the platoons, particularly earlier on in his career. He looked very smooth as a receiver there. A guy like Chase Brown from Illinois also was not used much as a receiver and as a passing down guy at Illinois. Conversely, with regards to Brown, he did not acquit himself well during the receiving drills there or the pass pro drills in Mobile. But Tyjae Spears really opened eyes in that aspect when he got his opportunity to do that. So Tyjae Spears was an enormous winner with regards to all that stuff. With Evan Hull, he came in even more under the radar than Tyjae Spears, but was a guy that had opened Debro and eyes, our colleague Debro, heading into this thing. Evan Hull was in a very bad collegiate situation. The only guy that he really played with was Peter Skoronsky, a guy that's going to go in the first round. Peter Skoronsky's a great player, that tackle at Northwestern, but the rest of the offense stunk. The rest of the offensive line around Skoronsky stunk. The quarterback was bad. The receivers were bad. And so Evan Hull became sort of a marked man on that team that ended up going 1-11. They beat Nebraska in Ireland in the opener, and then they ended up losing the rest of the games. But like you could tell that the physical skills that Evan Hull had, even amidst a sort of quagmire of an offense. First, like the thing that jumps out is how diverse his skill set is. He was amongst the leaders in all the running backs in the nation in terms of ADOT, in terms of percentages of snaps lined up in the slot, in terms of percentages of snaps lined up out wide, in terms of receptions, in terms of targets, in terms of receiving yards, all these different receiving things. He is very skilled as a receiver. It's not just the routes out of the backfield. It's, again, the utility when you can motion them out into the slot, motion them out wide. He is playable out there. It's not just as a gimmick. He is legitimately, he can run the routes from the slot and from out wide as well. I also think he is underrated as a runner. He has the short area quickness, the acceleration from a stop. He can also get out wide and take the edge. The lateral agility and stuff like that. There was a question in his evaluation about long speed that I think was essentially a myth. he's not like an Olympic level sprinter for sure, but like I saw scouting reports, Evan Hull scouting reports coming in where people were like forwarding this notion that he was going to run in the 4.6s, which I just think was BS. We talked to Evan Hull there, and Evan Hull says he's going to run in the 4.4s in Indianapolis. Now,
nice.
Evan Hull might be going a little far. Like, I think he's going to run in the 4.5s, but like, I think there's a better shot that he runs in the 4.4s than he does in the 4.6s. Yeah, I just don't think he's going to run in the 4.6s. So I think Evan Hull is a sleeper, both for NFL teams, but also for fantasy players and for dynasty players. Because if nothing else, he's going to be a good 1B back in the NFL. He's going to be a good passing down back, if nothing else. But again, I also think he is underrated as a pure runner. There's a shot that Evan Hull becomes like the 1A back of a committee. As a runner, he reminds me a bit of James Robinson. And as a receiver, he holds his own. Like he could be a top 20 receiving back in the NFL. So I would keep my eyes on Evan Hall.
How far? I just wanted a quick follow up, Pat. I just want to know how far Chase Brown fell, because I know Chase Brown had a terrible week. He had fumble issues, big pass protection issues. But this is a guy with over 300 carries this year. Like, we know he can tote the rock, but he had a hard time hanging on to it. And the little things, the intangibles, the receiving hasn't been good. So he's north south, and that seems about it right now. How far did he fall?
Big faller. Yeah, I was a little bit more tepid on him coming in. So maybe just in comparison to where I came in, maybe not as much. But like the people that were big fans of him, he definitely dropped further on their boards. Like for me, he is like a late day 3 guy.
Maybe. Right.
Maybe. Yeah. And I might not even draft him. And again, I'm lower on him than others. But like, you talk about like answering questions of the eval and then proving your strengths. He did basically the opposite. Like the strengths of Chase Brown, his profile, it was doing damage in the second and the third levels at Illinois, and they had a really good run blocking offensive line last year. And so he was able to, get, sort of scream into the second level and then get out into the third level and then, take it to the house, whatever. At the Senior Bowl, that wasn't available to him. We very, very rarely saw him get out into the second level and then be able to sort of go out there, whatever. The questions on his evaluation, it was the third down utility that I was talking about before. You rarely saw him catching the ball, and he didn't appear to be a good pass blocker either. He was getting ragdolled in the pass bro drills in Mobile, and the receiving utility just did not appear to be there whatsoever. He was not good in the one-on-ones as far as the route running whatsoever. The defenders were in his back pocket the entire time. They were at the catch point with him every single time. And then when the balls got there, they were clanging off his hands. Whether they were contested or not, there were some like dump offs where he's wide open that bounce off his hands. And then you mentioned the fumble problems. I don't have the numbers in front of me from the charting, but from what I remember, he fumbled the ball more as a runner than the other runners as well. It just was not a very good week for Chase Brown whatsoever. So for me, you didn't see proof of concept of the strength of his evaluation and the weaknesses of his evaluation. Not only did he not disprove them, but they all came to the forefront. Yes. It's sort of the definition of a loser of the Senior Bowl.
Yikes.
Yeah, I was going to ask you a question about Devon Achane, but I think it's pretty much what you said and how teams view him with the size or whatever. He's not Darren Sproles. The guy will definitely run through contact, as you guys saw, and like A&M worked him pretty hard, but just kind of an interpretation. So let's move to wide receiver. And I'm curious, Thor, 3 guys, it seems like, have maybe kind of separated themselves from the rest of the pack. Maybe that's not true, but do you think it's if it is in the top 3, Quentin Johnston, Jordan Addison, and Jaxon-Smith-Njigba, do you think that's the top 3? I feel like you're a Quentin Johnston guy. Is that true? Is he your number 1?
Yeah. I'm a big fan of Quentin Johnston. And by the way, I think Quentin Johnston could be better in the NFL than he was in college because, spoiler alert, we didn't touch on it, but I'm not a big Max Duggan guy. Because Max Duggan, he's one of the worst field readers, going through the progressions of any of these quarterbacks you'll ever see. But let's just say there was a lot of yards left on the field where Quentin Johnston's dude, like I'm open, man. Come on, toss me the ball. But yeah,
I think that was the reason Duggan was going to get benched at the beginning of this year, right? Was because he wasn't getting the ball.
Throw it to the 6'4" guy with 4.3 speed, please.
1,000% was 1,000% coming out of camp. Yeah, it's a great point. But yeah, no. So I'd have him number one. Number two is where it gets closer for me, but I actually don't have JSN in my top three. I do have JSN number four. Because of cost certainty, not because of ceiling. I question JSN's ceiling. For me, JSN is a high volume slot receiver in the NFL, but I don't think JSN can play on the outside in the NFL. So I just think he's like a volume, shuttle to shuttle kind of a guy I do think he's going to catch a lot of balls per season, but he's not explosive. So like like I said, just sort of a station to station guy. My second and third guys would be Addison, of course, and then Zay Flowers. I think Zay Flowers is a hell of a talent. We didn't get to see him in that.
Very small at the Shrine game. He's 5'9". So is that concerning at all?
He's very small, but he's very, very explosive, and he is very, very sudden.
I love him.
Very difficult to stay with. Yeah. And he played under the spotlight as well at Boston College. He had an opportunity to leave Boston College after and I thought he was going to.
Probably should have.
He probably should have. There was rampant rumors that he was going to transfer, but he ended up, being loyal and staying at Boston College. And then Boston College had another nightmare season or whatever. Like they were playing like walk-ons at offensive line and converting defensive tackles offensive line because it became so bad there or whatever. But Zay Flowers is a hell of a talent. Eric Galko, the CEO or director, whatever his title is, of the Shrine game, compares Zay Flowers to Jalen Waddle. That might be taking he might be a little bit biased, might be taking a little bit part, but Zay Flowers is certainly along that line of continuum. There's not many guys that move that well and are that explosive. So that's in Addison, he offers you, going back to the word cost certainty, he's just so efficient. And the route running is just so good. Obviously, the year before, and speaking of transfers, Addison was at Pitt and he won the Bolitnikoff with Kenny Pickett. Jordan Addison made Kenny Pickett a lot of money that year, whatever. But then he goes to USC, played with Caleb Williams. Wasn't quite as productive, I think, as we thought. But of course, he suffered through a couple nagging injuries last year. But I like how smooth, sort of buttery smooth Jordan Addison is, and I know he's going to have a super duper long career because of how smooth he is and the technical know-how that he has. But that's where you're. If Zay Flowers was more well fortified and I knew that he wasn't going to get injured at all, but of course that's sort of the crux of it. I would have him. I would for sure have him above Addison, but just sort of that's the thought experiment of it. Why it's who am I going to put two? But that's where I'm back and forth on those two guys.
Where does Jalin Hyatt fit, Thor? Because I've seen a lot of buzz on Hyatt, working his way into the first round. Is that a possibility? I mean, this is a guy with unbelievable explosion, great slot wide receiver, very fast, always open, snaps off a route, but he seemed like a slot guy, and a lot of things coming out of Tennessee are scheme specific to get him open. So I just where does he fit on your board right now?
Probably have Hyatt wide receiver 5 or 6, somewhere in that sort of range. I'm not as high on Hyatt as a couple other guys because he was the 1 year wonder. The year before it was Tillman. Tillman was the guy that everybody was interested in. Then obviously Tillman had the injury this year and he was out for most of the year. And then Hyatt ends up breaking out. But even when Hyatt broke out, it's the one trick pony utility, and the guy that you comp him to, it's this one sort of obvious. It's Will Fuller. You have the similar sort of build, and then it's going downfield. And there's absolutely a utility to that. But with the receiver position, if I'm going to take a guy in the first round, I just want a little bit more fleshed out of the skill set where they can beat you at more levels of the field.
Yeah, I was going to say Paris Campbell, that same type of slot guy, going to be very good in the slot. You can't move him outside, and you better hope he's wide open because he's not making contested catches.
Thor, where does Josh Downs fit in for you?
Downs, I would have him just a little bit behind Hyatt. Like I'd have Downs like, what would that be, like 7 or 8? Or actually I'd have Boutte above Downs. So I guess I'd have Downs like 8. But like Downs, it's another one where his utility, it's winning downfield. So it's, you saw a lot of those fly routes, but like a concern for him coming out of that system, we talked about this with Diami Brown. With UNC in that Longo system, they don't ask their receivers to do a ton. And in some ways, they don't ask their quarterbacks to do as much because they cut the field in half. It's like a numbers game. But like with the receivers, they're either asking them to run the fly route or else it's like something closer. You don't see the entire route tree like you do with some of these other teams or some of these other receivers. So we didn't get to see the entire fleshed out thing. But like you have seen Josh Downs consistently win downfield in a way that with some of these other guys you haven't. So at least like you have that. Like we know that we're going to see that. Want to see him prove the concept of that athleticism in Indianapolis. Once he stamps that and proves that concept, sort of solidify that stock. But yeah, I mean, I'll have him somewhere in that range.
At the Senior Bowl, Thor, Michael Wilson might have been the highest riser of the whole game and week. Dewan Jones maybe has something to say about that. I mean, his agent was like, quit practicing after day 2, or whatever, because he was so dominant. But Michael Wilson was dominant all week and in the game. A couple other wide receivers definitely got some helium here. Jayden Reed from Michigan State, Tank Dell from Houston, Puka Nacua from Washington, all rising, or BYU, all rising up boards here. Do you agree with those names, and did anyone else stand out positively or negatively for you among the wideouts?
Well, first, with regards to Dewan Jones, he's the second human being ever where I've kept my distance because I'm physically afraid around him.
Who was the first?
Daniel Falele 2019 Combine. I made sure to be arm's length away from, but like with those two, you had to be even, it's like double or triple.
I'll stand over here, please. Thank you.
Yeah, yep. but like I was in because this was on Thursday, and Dewan Jones, he pulled out after Tuesday, of the event, but like he stayed there and he was down in that tunnel, and I was like, oh my God. Because it's like, it's like the mountain in Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Where even when you're watching on the screen, you're afraid. And it's like, and he seems like a super nice kid, but it's like, holy mother of, like, you just don't see human beings that big. And Dewan Jones, he not only is he enormous, but like his hands are like his knuckles are almost like on the ground. It's like, oh my God. Like, I didn't know God. Yeah, I didn't know God made human beings like of that dimension. It's just like, holy crap. So yeah, it was just like in person. It's like, holy crap. But I need to get back on. Who'd you ask about?
Michael Wilson was the highest riser, and then the other guys on the list that I saw were Jayden Reed, Tank Dell, and Puka Nacua.
Yeah, as far as Michael Wilson and Bogman, as a college football guy, you're going to know where I'm going, and specifically college fantasy football guy. Yeah. Michael Wilson is a guy that I had on numerous college fantasy football teams over the years, and he was sort of a frustrating asset because you'd add him because he'd go off one week, he'd have like 8 catches for like 94 yards, and then he would get injured. And then he'd be out for 3 weeks, and then he'd like slowly work his way back, and then he'd go off for another game. Then he'd have another nagging injury, and he'd be out for 3 weeks. And it was just his entire career was like stop, start, stop, start, stop,
throw
start.
in a slow Neanderthal offense as well, and it's frustrating.
Yeah, he was in a bad situation, and he was constantly on and off the field. But the frustrating thing was every time you watched him play, he has the talent. He absolutely looks like an NFL receiver. He absolutely has an NFL game, and he was playing with an NFL quarterback and ostensibly or supposedly an NFL head coach. But yet it just was like it just wouldn't completely go. You'd see the flashes of it and specific games. It was like 2 or 3 games a year. It's like that's the Michael Wilson. But like it just the consistency wasn't there in part because of the health and the circumstances around him. But this week or last week, in Mobile, we got to see it over the multiple days and then into the game, whatever. there's a ton to like about his game when he gets to stay on the field. Built like an NFL receiver, he has the contact balance and the play strength down the field. He ain't affected by getting bumped. Like there's some of these guys where you can sort of bump them off their path, or where you get your hands on them off the line of scrimmage, where you can really hinder their path, or you can sort of funnel them where you want to go. Like Julius Brents in the one-on-one is great at this. Like he's just like a funnel. He's like, you're going this way or you're going that way. Like
he's
Michael Wilson
big too. Yeah,
he's a pterodactyl.
Michael Wilson has them hands, man.
But Michael Wilson's like, no, I'm not. Like I'm going where I want to go. You know, and it's like, but you just can't affect him. And the body control, it plays downfield. Like he's doing what he wants to do. It very well fortified, and he has the ball skills. So like, and you see all this different stuff, and he's more athletic than you give him credit for at that size. So like all that stuff sort of coalesced this week, and he was opening a lot of people's eyes, a lot of people that hadn't seen him in college, or maybe people that hadn't gotten around to his tape yet, because like he just flew in so under the radar because that collegiate profile wasn't there because of some of these circumstances that we talked about. So he was a big time riser. You mentioned Jayden Reed. He really opened up eyes because of the movement skills. We knew that kid was fast, but he's also so dang sudden. You know, like it was just really hard for people to stay with him in those one-on-ones. He's just so damn sudden, out of the route breaks and everything like that. I think the other thing about him that impressed people was the ball skills. You know, like I don't think that people gave him credit for those ball skills and the body control at the catch point, stuff like that.
Another guy with the bad quarterback situation in college. Yeah.
Terrible quarterbacks. Yeah, his offensive circumstances were not good, and so he got a better opportunity here to impress. Absolutely took advantage of that. Was one of the most athletic receivers out there. So yeah, Puka Nacua. Puka Nacua looked good on Tuesday. And then, he pulled out of the event after that. I'm not sure if he had an injury that wasn't disclosed or if he just decided to piece it. But he looked good on Tuesday. The limited looks that we got. Tank looked awesome. Yeah, Tank might have been the most impressive receiver out there. It's an event that behooves Tank's skill set because like nobody can stay with Tank in one-on-ones, like in the open field or whatever. The only way to stop Tank if you're in one-on-one coverage with him.
I like that there's two tanks in this draft, by the way, and one is a tank and the other is absolutely not a tank. And we're talking about the not a tank here.
Yeah, the other one is like when you call like a skinny person like Biggie, or you
or big guy Slim, right? Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, but like the only way to stop him if it's like a one-on-one assignment, you must shut him down at the line of scrimmage, like in the press. You just have to get your hands all over him. You don't do that, you're cooked. You're already dead. And so like we only saw that a little bit on Tuesday. Brent, it's like the one guy that could, just a little bit, but like anyone that didn't do that, they were dead. And so people were getting cooked. They were getting cooked by Tank on Tuesday, and on Wednesday, you started to see a new strategy by the cornerbacks in the one-on-ones where they were literally just grabbing onto Tank out of his route breaks. And so the little play refs, like they had the refs out there, like the fake ones, they were actually throwing the flags in the practices on Wednesday, which you almost never see.
Yeah.
But it was so obvious because you would literally see Tank's jersey.
And most of the time they're like, guys, just let them practice, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like they're mostly out there.
They're
just out there for decoration. But like, it was so comical that they were having to throw the flags. Nobody could stay with that kid. But the defenders were just like, yeah, let's just go to the next rep. I don't want to get embarrassed by this kid again.
Let's close with tight ends, Thor. And I remember when we had you on the last show of our most recent season before we went dark for the NFL regular season, we closed with tight ends. And I remember you teasing it and saying that you thought this was going to be a pretty good tight end class. And, the other day I was, I think I was flying back from Vegas and looking at Daniel Jeremiah's top 50. And I think I saw 5 tight ends in his top 45. So do you think this is one of the better tight end classes we've had in recent years? And who do you kind of like? I think Michael Mayer is sort of the consensus number one. And, I've heard the Jason Witten comps with him, but maybe spotlight some of the other guys you like.
Yeah, the overall tight end class is great. Unfortunately, the tight end class of Mobile wasn't quite as good because, a lot of these guys didn't show up to it. We did get Musgrave there, but the overall tight end class in the draft is great. You mentioned Mayer. I love Dalton Kincaid. I don't know how many people have gotten to watch him yet from Utah, but he broke out in a big way this year. fabulous receiver. He is super skilled.
And he was supposed to be the second best tight end on his team, right? Brant Kuithe was supposed to be better than him.
Brant Kuithe, yeah, and then Brant Kuithe gets injured early in the year, so then
Kincaid really took advantage.
Yeah, they do run the 2 tight end sets, but then Kincaid became like the, he was super duper featured and just like I said, really broke out. Yeah. Darnell Washington is like the super freak, like Monstar from Space Jam kind of a guy. Like he's 6'7" or 6'8" and like 275 pounds and moves super duper well. I'm really curious to see how he tests. But the guy from Georgia, who's essentially like a third offensive tackle on the line, but can also catch. Solid athlete at that size, like a really good athlete for that size. And then the fourth guy in that sort of consensus top 4, and I think has now solidified himself as that after Mobile, is Musgrave. Like Musgrave was like the guy that people were excited about. I needed to see it because Musgrave, he was expected to break out this past fall. Like people knew he was athletic. He has the frame, has the bloodlines, his dad is Bill or whatever. But like we hadn't seen it because I think prior to this past year, he'd only started like 10 games or something in his career, but then he got injured very early into last season. So like we just like, I think right now he's only started 14 career games and, he's only had like 40 some career catches, but like, on his film, he moves really well. That he's a good athlete. We have some of the spring testing from him. He went out and confirmed that he was the fastest tight end by the max speed. They have the zebra tracking or whatever. He's one of the few tight ends, I think, that with the zebra tracking has ever gone over 20 miles per hour. So like, I mean, he's gone out and proved it with the analytics that at least that the Senior Bowl gives you. And we know that he's going to test really well. I think they extrapolated it out where they, as far as like the tracking data to a 4.5s in Indy. So like, we'll see if he ends up going out and improving the concept of that, but he's expected to go out and test very well. So, does he get into the first round? I'm not sure about that, but pretty sure he's going to at least be a top 50 pick. And then I think there's at least 2 other tight ends outside of that probably get into round 2 as well. I like Sam Laporta, the kid from Iowa that I know pretty well. You
talk about bad QB play, Thor.
Yes.
Oh man.
Basically their only source of offense. And yeah, he was stranded in just about the worst offensive situation that you could ever be in, but still managed to catch balls every single game. And then Tucker Kraft I was going to say mystery box, just because he's jumping up in competition, but South Dakota State won the FCS title last year. And we have plenty of tape of that kid catching a lot of balls. And by the way, South Dakota State actually opened the season against Iowa last year. So we had a very good tight end matchup in that one. So
that was the safety field goal game, right? They got to 7 points, but it was safety field goal. So, well, Thor, thank you so much for joining us on Dynasty Pod to talk about your experience at the Senior Bowl and some of these other prospects at Thor KU on the Twitter. And please tell everyone what you have coming up and where they can find everything that you do.
Yeah, we're going to be starting the scouting report series and the position by position rankings. So you can be looking for that on FantasyPros coming up, and we'll be running through that over the next couple months, culminating in the Thor 500, the 500 player big board with 500 comps. So be looking for that this spring.
And at Fitz_FF for Fitzy. What do we have coming up, Fitz? What are you up to these days?
My last player props article and video of the season. You'll be able to find it at bettingpros.com and also at our Betting Pros YouTube channel. So some good player props for the Super Bowl, and one that includes an NBA player too. So I'll just leave that tease
excellent.
Out there.
I love those. Combined props.
Cross sport, man.
It's going to be a lot of fun. Well, you can find me on the Twitter at Bogman Sports. I'm, of course, here on the Fantasy Pros Dynasty Pod. You can catch me over in this league with the Welsh as well. I got my baseball rankings up at Fantasy Pros and at inthisleague.com. The War Room podcast with myself and CK. And just follow my Twitter at Bogman Sports. You can find all the stuff that I'm doing over there. That is it for us. We appreciate you guys hanging out with us and talking some football. We'll see you guys next week. Take it easy, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. Don't forget to check out our featured videos And while you're at it, make sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at FantasyPros, so you can get the latest news and updates to give you the edge you need in your fantasy league.